we'll do the Edge of Tomorrow today.
Oh, I see what you've done.
See what you did there.
Nice. Yeah. Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. I just need a really quick wee-wee, then we'll crack on.
I need to do a wee-wee. Yeah.
I did my wee-wee.
Hello, and welcome back. Eatock's had a Coke. He's gone early on his Coke.
Started
early and he's blown his nose. To Off Radar. This has been a weird start. I'm James Smith. Who am I? That was...
Hello.
That's James Eatock.
Hello.
And that's Neil Brock.
Hello.
Who we call Nige.
No, that's me.
Hello.
Hi.
Today, we're a bit confused. We've done this 15 times and I just keep going round and round in circles doing this.
See what's done here. This is
and
genius.
I don't know why you guys don't know that I keep doing this same intro over and over again. I just keep going round and round in circles doing this.
See what's done here. This is
and
genius.
I don't know why you guys don't know that I keep doing this same intro over and over again.
See what's done here. This is
and
genius.
I don't know why you guys don't know that I keep doing this same intro over and over again.
You should repeat it as a joke.
I shouldn't.
That'd be so good.
Today we are doing a film called The Edge of Tomorrow, which came out in 2014. Firstly, I take it we'd all seen this before we did it for the pod.
Yes, I saw it. The first time I saw it was actually on a plane.
Oh,
yeah, I was on an airplane and it scared me because there's one scene that I'll talk about that actually made me go, oh, on the plane. And then I thought, I don't want to be scared on a plane. A plane is the last place you want to be scared. And I was scared for a moment on a plane.
I watched Final Destination on a plane, and that was...
surely they cut that.
I was going to say, they're not allowed to...
Yeah.
Plane cut
maybe I watched it on an iPad on a plane, so it's my choice.
Okay, that's your own stupidity.
Yeah. It's your own fault. Everybody around Swift going, look what he's watching.
Everyone listening was like, oh my goodness. Now we're like, idiot.
I take it you'd seen it as well, Nige?
I had, yeah. Do you know what? I couldn't actually remember how, where, when I watched this film. I imagine it was just, I don't know, whether it was on TV, whether I sort of borrowed a DVD. I just can't really remember having watched it, although I remembered quite a lot about it. It's
weird. With this film, I've seen this quite a few times. It's been a film that I've revisited out of choice. This film, just before we get going, was recommended by Rich Allen on Twitter.
Oh, Rich Allen!
I forgot you recommended
So Rich has recommended that for us to watch. So yeah, thanks, Rich. And we will get to your review and rating at the end, which you kindly sent to me earlier today. So the film Edge of Tomorrow 2014, it came out. It was directed by Doug Liman, who we recently spoke about.
Did we?
Yes, we did, in a film called Go. And as we discussed in that podcast, he's obviously did Swingers, Born Identity. Then he went and did Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which was terrible.
Oh my God, I saw that at the cinema.
The documentary about your life.
Yes, that is my life story.
I saw that at the cinema. I forgot he directed that.
Jumper.
Wow.
American Made with Tom Cruise again. He did that as well. And it was written by Christopher McQuarrie, Jez Butterworth, and John Henry Butterworth. I imagine they're brothers.
Why do I know McQuarrie? I know McQuarrie's name.
Yeah, I think he's done some quite famous stuff, but it was based on like a manga type story, wasn't it? Like originally Japanese conceived, so it was like an adaptation of that story
Okay.
And the film stars, I mean, if you've seen this film, you know who it stars. One of the biggest action stars or film stars of all time, Tom Cruise. And
then
last
Bill
movie
Paxton
star.
there, to be honest.
Brendan Gleeson. And then
that bloke from Abbott's, the British bloke, I can't remember his name.
He's in Afterlife as well, isn't he?
Is he? Oh, there you go. Tony Way,
he was in Spaced as well. I remember him in Spaced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's like it's really, and
then,
back a long time.
Obviously, so Tom Cruise, Emily Blunt, and as we said, Brendan Gleeson, and also Bill Paxton, and a few others that pop up.
But those two are very much the focal point.
I would say Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt are pretty much this film, really. Nige, I asked you to give us a little bit of a rundown of.
Oh, this should be good.
It's 2015, and an asteroid hits, and these aliens called mimics invade the Earth. Starting with continental Europe, they sort of fight their way across. Where we pick up the film is Tom Cruise's character, Major William Bill Cage, is basically a publicity guy for the army. And Emily Blunt's character is known as the angel of somewhere or another? Angel of essentially a battle. She does so well in a battle that she becomes essentially like the face of the Earth's defense force. Tom Cruise, on his like PR tour, goes to the general. It's all about like the exoskeletons and stuff like that. And during a conversation, ends up that he's going to be on the front line, which obviously isn't in his MO. Tom Cruise, for once, playing a coward who wants to basically get out of the fight. Which is a real good twist for him.
With his Tom Cruise grin, as his Hollywood smile, he's like, and it's like, no, you're going to be going on the front line, and the way he plays that. Fantastic.
And essentially, he ends up at sort of the drill camp just before this invasion, that they're going to undertake a huge invasion against the alien force. Bill Paxton's his sergeant, gives him a lot of grief, introduces him to his squad, and before you know it, Tom Cruise is being dropped out of a plane, essentially, to fight these aliens in a giant ecto suit, I should say, where he doesn't even know how to turn off the safety.
You're saying ecto, do you mean exo? Because it's an exoskeleton.
Exosuit. There's a difference. Exos, because it's exoskeleton, isn't it? Of course.
Yeah.
Exos. I can't pronounce it. He's in a bloody suit. He's got a bow tie on. He's having a little jig. He's fighting. Whilst he's fighting, he notices Emily Blunt's character, who gets killed. And he's like, oh my goodness, if she dies, everyone's going to die. He sort of scrambles his way through things until he meets this slightly larger alien mimic creature that's blue, and finally, like finding a sort of bit of a backbone, he grabs hold of like a mortar or sort of an explosive device and takes it out. And as it does, this alien sort of bleeds all over his face, and it's like a weird little CGI bit where
that's
his face
the scene
is melting.
that made me like just get scared on a plane, because he's like, his face is like, oh, and he's like all like melts, and I was like, oh, like watching that on a night flight.
It's really weird seeing Tom Cruise so vulnerable in that moment, like dying like that. How often do you see that? Yeah, 20 minutes in and both the main characters are dead, and then the film ends.
but it's great, because then the next cut, the immediate cut is him waking up going, oh, holding his face, which is such like a great little comedy moment, because like he's just burnt to death, all this like liquid alien blood goes in, he's like, ugh.
You see, this isn't the first time. Now, we've had this conversation. What day is it?
Judgment Day. You just came in with the fresh recruits.
This is not the end. The invasion will fail, along with every soldier you are sending. We lose everything.
Well, yeah, and essentially he's back. It's Groundhog Day all over again. The day repeats. And he later finds out that Emily Blunt's character has had exactly the same thing the previous day, but eventually, after getting wounded and not killed, she had a blood transfusion that means she can no longer relive that same day. And it basically goes on from there, and it's a case of them trying to figure out a way of using Tom Cruise's advantage to repeat days to figure out how to beat this alien force that is seemingly unbeatable.
You do know what's happening to me.
What happened to you happened to me. You hijacked their power.
I'm so used to, at the beginning of Tom Cruise film, seeing him hanging off a cliff or jumping off a plane or riding a bike. And in this film, he lands in Trafalgar Square.
Riding a little bicycle.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it's Tom Cruise riding a bicycle.
Riding a scooter. But no, he is this vulnerable, weak character for the yeah, exactly, for that first part of this film. And Emily Blunt, which is kind of crazy casting, really. I'm used to seeing Tom Cruise,
I love her in this.
Play alongside, like really fit, like kind of like
I love Etok there, just like
I love her. Yeah.
She's my favourite.
But she is she's so not what you expect. She's so downplayed, she's moody, she's English, she's kind of like the polar opposite to what he would normally act alongside in a big blockbuster film, which is what this.
And he's fought really hard to get her cast as well. Like, she had done, I think, like The Devil's Wears Prada beforehand.
Right.
So there wasn't really that kind of big leading where you're like, she's a leading lady kind of thing. I think she'd done a few smaller things. There was that weird like sci-fi film she did around this time, The Adjustment Bureau as well.
Yes, with Matt Damon.
Matt Damon, which was
I remember seeing that advertised.
It kind of came and went. It did okay. Like, when I watched it, I thought it was fine.
I thought it was
Spoiler
fine
for the review we ever do. But yeah, she wasn't quite at that level where you expected, if you were going to get someone who kind of plays, I guess, almost like a Sigourney Weaver in Aliens type character, or Linda Hamilton from Terminator, someone who is a strong, powerful woman.
We can do this. Just come here every day and I'll train you.
She is holding his hand to begin with. She is like the action hero. And like you said, with the loop thing, so obviously they're like trying to figure out how to kill this alien. But one of the best things I think about this film is how their relationship over this kind of period develops, or his relationship, you would say, develops with her. But she's obviously only getting to know him every day once again. And we've seen this many times. In Groundhog Day is probably one of the biggest and best examples of that.
Or Palm Springs, one of our previous podcasts, if you want to go back and listen to it.
Absolutely. But she's the alpha in this film, which is crazy.
Well, she is
to begin with.
A good chunk of it. And then eventually he becomes the kind of male saviour, which there was a lot of talk about kind of like the feminist aspect of this film. And there was certainly, if you want to go online and look this up, there's a lot of discussion about how it goes a bit too far, how Emily Blunt's character, Rita, in the film, like eventually kisses him, which was something actually that was improv by Emily Blunt when they were filming it. It wasn't actually in the script, and that's sort of romanticizing their relationship. It's kind of got a few thumbs down from people, but yeah, she's very built up to be that kind of strong, powerful character, and certainly their roles, they never sort of reverse. She doesn't become a weak character by any stretch of the imagination. He isn't spending all his time saving her. It's just that they become more equals, and maybe he suddenly becomes slightly stronger of the two.
And that's because he has to, doesn't he? Because he has to learn, he has to, like...
Well, he's one with the ability.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's not like they're doing it. I just
want to point out, I think one of the bravest things this movie does is have their two lead characters named Bill and Rita, which sounds like a 1970s British sitcom.
Oh, hello, Rita.
Oh, I've burnt the toast. Oh, Bill. It's like Bill and Rita. I mean, it's great. Bill Cage. I mean, that sounds like a wrestler, doesn't it? Really. What's her name? Rita. I forget her surname now. What's up, Bill and Rita?
Their names are actually based on that short story. So if I can,
Bill and Rita.
So the original book was called All You Need Is Kill. And was exactly, yeah.
Like
you can
that.
see why it ended up being like, what was the other name for this film? It was The Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah,
they called it
Live, Die, Repeat. Well, it's kind of had two names which didn't work.
I think the marketing of this film is bloody awful, because those posters said, Edge of Tomorrow, but the biggest words on it were Live, Die, Repeat. So you have people saying, "Oh, have you seen Live, Die, Repeat?" I think it confused so many people.
Well, it was supposed to be a tagline. It was never supposed to be the title.
Yeah.
And then on DVDs you can buy, it's got that on the side, and it's like, well, wait a minute, that's clearly the title. So, as you say, there was clearly some confusion there.
from the beach landing when he lands, and what I love about that is you're as terrified as he is, because you're going into it like when the floor of the ship opens and you're like, oh my god, and he plays it so well. Like, he's got no idea how to use his suit, all this stuff, and he's dropped onto the beach.
That comparison as well to, you know, like classic war films of them landing on a beach and stuff.
I was going to go Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if you were going there, that was my whole point, is like, I got such Saving Private Ryan-esque vibes from this, like the craziness of everything going off, there's no plan in place, which, you know, was the landings on Normandy. It was just like, right, the thing's going to open, a bunch of us are going to get shot, we're going to jump off the sides of the boat, we're going to try and storm the beach whilst we're being shot at. Very much the same thing here. It's like they land, and there's one line that's such a throwaway line in it, in the opening, where they land the first time we get to the beach. One of the guys goes, it's like they knew we were here. And it's like, that's because they keep playing with time. They know you're going to be here every time.
Yeah.
I love how those, and I mean, maybe one of you guys knows a bit more about it than I do, but like the way the creatures are moved, like, it must be so hard in Hollywood to go, right, we're making a film, we need some aliens to fight. It's like, okay, so he's got 2 legs and 2 arms and he's going to go, bleh. These things, the way they move, they're fast, they're unpredictable. When they kind of attack, the camera kind of shifts, and they're almost like very explosive. But I thought these like some of the most terrifying creatures Hollywood has produced in decades.
Basically, this film is like a computer game, so he gets a bit closer each time, gets to a new level, and then goes up a level. And the aliens are almost like in a shoot 'em up computer game where you're like,
yeah, of course.
But yeah, I think you're right. And the only other thing I was going to say about the beach thing, and I know this is kind of stating the obvious here, but, you know, a beach is meant to be a lovely, serene, beautiful place. So the contrast of that with not just war, but aliens and people getting like absolutely like killed and bludgeoned to death. And although the deaths, they're not Starship Trooper-esque violence, you know.
No, there's nothing that gory.
It's not gore.
Not people's limbs getting ripped off or anything like that.
But it's still quite gruesome in some ways. Like, you know, when the fat guy dies, and like this was a point in the film where Tom Cruise's character has that bit where he goes like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day and kind of gives up, and has that, you know, like, oh, I can't be arsed anymore, I'm just going to let them die and see what happens. You know, so he like lets him die, and then like he actually lets Thingy die, Emily Blunt's character die at that point.
Well, there's one scenario where he does the day where he ends up going to the dam to figure out, like, oh, this is where I saw it in the vision, like after he's done the battle so many times, and just kind of gives up.
Yeah, he says because he gets too close to her, and he's just like, I don't want to be in that position where I have to keep her safe. Whatever happen will happen. Obviously he knows what happens to her when he's not there. She gets shot almost within the first couple of minutes of landing on the beach. Like, there's no way around that.
Yeah, and I love that the kind of his kind of, oh, like, I'm just going to go to the dam, see what's there, and it turns out, oh, that was a ruse, as it were. That was a blue herring, as it were. Sorry. I thought the way they play with the time jumping, I mean, it is, let's be honest, it is, you know, the Groundhog Day elements are inescapable.
It's been done.
but it's
done so well, though.
Done so well, like. And it's got, I think every scenario, there's comedy moments, like the timing of it, like when he's doing the push-ups and he goes, I'm going to roll under this Jeep, and he rolls too far and gets squashed.
Yeah.
And
yeah, there is comedy.
What were you thinking, boy?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
He's
and then
very
you see
good
it
as
like
well, Paxton.
He is.
Paxton's
He's surprisingly like out of nowhere. The other thing is, like, the comedy surprised me, actually. That was one of the things I didn't really remember going back to this film, that, you know, like, that actually does have like those funny moments and funny deaths.
The training exercise when he's getting thick, and she goes, and she has to shoot him like every time. He goes, no, it's just my leg's just broken. It's fine. It'll be.
There's one bit where he's like, all I can move are my lips. And she's
yeah.
The only thing I can feel are my lips.
There is no messing about with this film, as in, we're into the film straight away. There's no backstory, but I think, like, for me,
well, there's like news footage, isn't there, to show the invasion?
No, but what I mean is, like, character-wise, we don't get any backstory whatsoever. We don't know that much about them, but that, I think, is part of the charm, because what it does is it helps you figure out who they are and what they are while they are kind of figuring it out. Because at one point, for the first loop or two, I think Tom Cruise's character is really confused as to what's going on. Although on the second loop, he remembers every conversation, which I thought was a little bit clunky of the writer.
But he's a PR man, so that's kind of their job to be like,
that's a good save.
In a room, yeah.
No, so I was with Smith on that. I was like, how does he remember so much?
It's like the card is under there.
Guy, so.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. No, it's I do love the way they play with the loop, though, is that there seems to be stages. At first, he's like, right, I have the ability to do this. Like, one of the best bits is when I think it's like you see that he's been doing this for a while, because you don't see him. He just goes onto the beach, he saves Rita, and then he does that bit where he's talking to her and he shoots behind him.
Yeah.
Like, he shoots up to the roof, and you're like, last time he got killed doing that. But that means that he's gone through that scenario at that point probably about 10 or 20 times. And it's kind of like Groundhog Day, where you don't, you don't
have to see it.
You get you know that these things have taken place. So initially, what I love about the time loop is that it starts off where he's like, right, this is my mission. I've got to get us across the beach, And then after a while, like we said, he gets to the helicopter point. I think they get across the beach, and then he says to her, I've tried this scenario so many times, you die every time. We can never get in the helicopter and escape because you get killed, and no matter how many times I try, you die. So he avoids that. And it's how, instead of, he plays with the loop. So instead of going through the whole beach landing, it gets to the point where it's like, right, me and I'm going to explain it to Rita, very quickly, and we're gonna it's Rita, it's such a great name. We're gonna get together the group that he's been assigned with initially, and we're gonna go on this mission, because there's this other character you get to meet who's like this scientist who I think it's like wonderfully reasonable in simple terms that they explain it so easily. It's like, when you killed this creature, his blood went into you, you gained its ability to control time. And the science of it is, I think, really quite well grounded. It's not well, I don't get that. It's like, oh no, it seems pretty straightforward. These aliens can control the flow of time. The blood gets into his system. Therefore, he's now got the ability to control time. I think it's really nice that it doesn't go, well, because it's the neutrons in his system or anything like that. It's just
on paper, as you're reading there, it sounds absolutely ridiculous. And had someone told me about this film before I watched it on a first watch, I would think this is a film that I'm not going to like. But you're right, it does do it incredibly well. And obviously, like we said, Doug Liman directs it, and he's definitely got a certain way of bringing you through the journey with Tom Cruise's character, because I take it you're with Tom Cruise in every scene in this, pretty much, right? I
think yeah, you have to be when you're telling this story.
I can't think of another scene where
I can't think of any point where he's not.
No matter what I do, this is as far as you go.
Why does it matter what happens to me?
But the other thing, as well as that direction, is the editing. Obviously I work as an editor, and I feel like the editing in this film is some of the best editing I've seen, and you wouldn't even know it. But when you watch, especially the action sequences, but even like you said, the storytelling techniques, to tell that story over and over again is one thing, but to tell this story over and over again very well and pick up where you left off, and then and the cut is, at times it's really quick fire, but at times then it slows down a bit, and you see a bit more of Tom Cruise falling for Emily Blunt, for instance, which obviously is going to happen, but it happens. And, you need that depth to his character in this film, I think. Otherwise, it would become quite standard.
I disagree on that, in the sense of I don't like that aspect.
You don't like the love story?
They can have a relationship.
You didn't need the kiss. You don't need that kiss at the end.
Like I said, it was improv, and Doug Liman said it just worked and everything like that. But I don't know. Think of it from his perspective. He's seen her hundreds and hundreds of days, and she's only known him for a day. To form that kind of bond. it stretches. I mean, the whole thing stretches believability because obviously what's happening, aliens invading, time jumping, etc., etc. But the fact that she could have that much of a feeling for him the day after she was in love with someone else who she saw die, it's just a bit like, really? Does that quite add up? But I get what you're saying. Like the fact they build that relationship, and you do genuinely feel involved in that. It's
like I said, it's more that he develops that relationship is the bit that I thought was excellent, because there is still a bit of a grey area, like the kiss.
Well, he says there's that line on the farm where he says like, I wish I didn't know you, but I do. I thought it was a really good line in that film, because it's like, if he didn't know her, which is why, as we talked about before, the next scenario, he's like, I'm going to avoid interacting with her. I'm just going to get off the beach, or I'm going to go to my own, going to go my own kind of route, as it were.
We kind of mentioned it. He's a coward. He's a selfish person, and obviously he doesn't want to be in that situation at all. And he grows these feelings throughout the film, and like that respect that he has for her, she respects him for what he can do. Essentially, not only has he got these powers, but he's obviously trained his bollocks off to get to a position where he's gone from being an absolute loser to a hero. But then she doesn't remember all that. Of course she doesn't. She doesn't know he was a loser. She doesn't know he was a coward. She doesn't know any of that. So I don't know. I wouldn't go as far as to call it a plot hole or anything like that. It's just, it didn't
plot stretch,
plot stretch, I suppose. And I feel like the longer this film goes on, it goes from being exceptional to just stretching a lot of little things where it's like, okay, I do like the premise of the final act where he loses his power. So basically he gets a blood transfusion. So now we're in a territory where he has one last chance. So he can die. So he's got one last chance with his team to save the world.
I
mean,
it's a
Tom Cruise movie, so he's to complete the level. So that final premise, you do, you must defeat him, the big boss man with his truncheon. The big boss man was back into wrestling. So you get that real sense of tension when.
Especially when he's hanging upside down and he's trying to get out, and they're about to come in, and I don't know what they're doing actually, and he's like hanging upside down, and Emily Blunt obviously comes in and goes, what are you doing here, or whatever, and
I don't know what that is.
I don't.
There's a bit when he's on a hospital bed upside down.
Topples off a hospital bed.
Oh, he's on the bed. He's on the hospital bed. He flips over,
bed and he's hanging upside down.
You said he was upside down. I was like, pictured him like upside down, like Dracula or something.
Again, for me, like you say, it gets to this position where like now all of a sudden they're on their last life. That they're much more at risk. And then when they storm the Louvre and they're falling and they're battering and all this stuff happens to them, it's like they don't sort of take a dent. It's almost like they become invincible. Now they've only got one life left. And again, that for me it just didn't sit quite as well as like the early portion.
I think the interesting thing with this film is how are you going to end this film now and make it satisfying without it becoming absolutely bonkers. And I'm not sure how you would.
Well, the original ending, the aliens won.
Oh, good.
Ending, as in not filmed, but conceived during the script writing phase, was that they kind of get to that point and then they realise the aliens knew everything all along and they win, and all the good guys die, which is obviously a really depressing ending for this sort of film, which is largely a blockbuster.
It reminds me of another ending that was planned for a film that would have been very sad. The ending of Dodgeball.
Oh yeah, where the bad guys win. Yeah,
the bad guys win and the credits roll. Yeah. Well, it's one of my favourite.
It's like Little Shop of Horrors. The original ending is that the plants like just eat Seymour, eat everyone, and take over the world. Yeah. But I just wanted to go back to like the actual sort of original basis of this film. So there was a book written about it called All You Need Is Kill, as I mentioned. And
I love that title.
In relation to that, we've mentioned video games a couple of times in relation to this, like the aspect of life, your last lives and stuff like that. And it was written from that perspective. Someone who was really into gaming thought, I'm going to write a book that kind of follows that idea, which is why there's so many tropes from video games that sort of heavily tie into this. The whole exoskeleton machines, that sort of armoured mech type thing has been very common in gaming for the last sort of 20 odd years plus. But yeah, that original novel was then turned into a graphic novel, manga style, and then obviously eventually got translated to English and picked up in the States, and eventually the idea was picked up and sort of Tom Cruise got involved, and the rest is history.
Once Tom Cruise gets involved, that film's getting made.
But yeah, like I was looking at the names as well, and yeah, she is called Rita in the book as well, and it's more because it's like a fake name she gives after her family dies and she sort of joins the war effort. But yeah, I don't know why they called him Bill. Obviously William's a short version of Bill, but his name in the book was like Kiri Keji, which sort of the English pronunciation, Keji, cage, that's where the kind of link came from.
Okay. So they kind of did their best to pay homage to its source material.
Absolutely. But again, in the book, it's a bit darker. Spoilers for anyone who wants to read the book, that her character dies and completely dies, and that's it. Whilst obviously in the film, there's a bit more of a kind of, it's a very nice, neat bow, basically.
In the film, they paid Emily Blunt millions and said, well, we ain't just having her for 5 seconds in this movie.
No. But yeah, I think for me, like that last part, it's so enjoyable. But yeah, the last part, it drops off a bit.
It does drop off.
The main core of the film is really enjoyable, but as soon as they get to the farmhouse, as soon as they get off the beach, the whole sort of arc of the film suddenly changes.
I do love the scene, we haven't talked about it, where he confronts Brendan Gleeson in the MOD building.
So he's, just to sort of give context, he's the general that basically busted Tom Cruise's ass and made him go on the beach in the first place.
So yeah, Tom Cruise walks in with Rita, or Bill walks in with Rita. Bill and Rita walk into Brendan Gleeson's
and they're
office.
like, oh, we're Bill and Rita from a 60s sitcom.
Over and over.
We bought some bread and it's got some mould on it.
No, I just seen Bill and Rita, the TV series. Classic. So he goes in, confronts Brendan Gleeson, and says basically, "I'm going to explain it." And then we realise he's had this conversation before, and Tom Cruise is at this point going, "Look, we've had this conversation before." He goes through it, and then Brendan Gleeson gets up, and Tom Cruise is like, "Oh, this is where I get arrested or whatever." And he walks to the safe and and they walk out the building. He's got like this this device that he required that Brendan Gleeson was keeping in a safe. And they exit the building, and Rita turns to Bill and goes, "What happens now?" And he goes, "I don't know. I've never got this far." I just love that. That was very much a video game thing. It's like, what do we do now? It's like, I don't know. I've never got this far.
What do we do now?
I don't know. We've never gotten this far.
And then the kind of dramatic irony in that is they walk outside the building and then get a load of shooters come and
don't move! Nobody move!
Also, just while we're quite near the end, obviously, so basically he kills this massive, great, big alien, and you think, well, maybe he's dead then because that was his last life. But no, actually, he kind of gets this other mimic kind of go on him, and it resets again, but he's landing at Trafalgar Square. And this is a clever bit, because I forgot about this when you watch it, and you're like, oh, is it going to be one of those endings where it, says, actually, or is it going to leave it open, which I thought might have been better in some ways, lands and you don't know if it's that
would have been interesting had they done that,
or not. I don't know how, but rather than, because then they make it very obvious that they've won the war basically.
I do love the fact the film ends with the best Tom Cruise kind of ending you never hope for. It's just a Tom Cruise smile. I love her. He goes up to Rita. She doesn't know who he is, and he just does a little Tom Cruise, and he just does that smile. And that's why you're that's why you're a fucking Hollywood star, mate. Because no one can smile like that.
What do you want?
I need to know now.
The other thing I wanted to just mention quickly was the music. So it's all very, to me, it sounded to begin with, like Hans Zimmer, but it's not. It's a guy called...
I can't remember the music at all to this film.
It's drones and drums. It's all quite, it's kind of Hans Zimmer. Here's some underneath what I'm saying. But it's, a guy called Christopher Beck, and he wanted to create it to make it feel very raw and, kind of alien-y and stuff, and you can definitely see that Inception-ish kind of style in this film, I think.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And it's funny, actually, around the time they released this, Tom Cruise did Oblivion, didn't he?
Yes.
Which, again, has kind of got that futuristic sort of vibe. Even though this film's set in 2015, because of all the mech and the war stuff and the aliens, it feels a lot more futuristic than the actual setting is. Yeah. But yeah, Oblivion, I think he kind of went through a spell of wanting to make certain types of films that were interesting for him and potentially fun for him to do. So yeah, and I think this certainly falls into that. If you compare it with some of the stuff he did before, and he did that Night and Day as well, did a lot of what you could almost call like throwaway actiony films, or
Last Samurai.
Yeah, see, Last Samurai was really good.
That was a lot earlier, wasn't it?
Before,
I think.
Yeah, a good 15 years before, I'd have said. So trivia for this film, like Tom Cruise is obviously quite well known for being a guy who does all his own stunts, and Doug Liman sort of joked to say, yeah, he'd make a decent bit of money out of being a stuntman, probably not quite as much as he does as an actor. But Emily Blunt did a lot of her stunts as well. And there's a scene where when they first get off the beach, they steal a car essentially, and there's a caravan attached to the back, and he's like, oh, you've got to make sure you detach it. She doesn't. Anyway, when they're filming that scene, they're actually driving along, and Emily Blunt absolutely screwed up a turn and almost drove them both into a tree, which would have probably killed them both.
The irony.
And she was like, oh my God, I almost killed Tom Cruise. And Tom Cruise was just laughing about it.
He's like, because
he's like,
don't worry, Emily.
It's Tom Cruise. But it's like, you can't kill me, I'm immortal.
Yeah.
But then
he's so into the role.
Well, exactly. But then they had to do a few reshoots after they completed filming. And when Emily Blunt came back, she wasn't doing the stunts for her role, and Tom Cruise, being Tom Cruise, was a bit like, why the hell aren't you doing... Yeah, he didn't speak like that. He basically questioned why she wasn't doing the stunts, and the reason was because she was actually pregnant at the time.
Wow.
And she hadn't told anyone except her husband and one very close friend, but felt she had to tell Tom Cruise to explain why she wasn't doing the stunts in the film.
That's amazing.
So there you go, Tom Cruise.
I bet when she told him, he was like and he just shook her.
The risky business pose and put on the glasses.
Yeah. Put on shades.
So yeah. And when she gave birth, it was actually Tom Cruise. Have a little Tom Cruise, and did the slide again.
Oh my God.
Etok, kick us off.
Oh, I'm doing the review. Okay,
what do you think, and what is your rating out of 10?
I think I'm falling in the same way as Nige, and I guess you, Smith, as well. It's like premise, it's it's Groundhog Day. It's a sci-fi story that's been done before, but they do a really good job of what they do with the story. They you can tell a looping story all day long, but I think they really, like I say, there's different stages of it. There's the comedy, there's the frustration. You see all these. And Tom Cruise is great in it. As I said before, Emily Blunt, I love her in this because I love her. Strong character. I think their chemistry is really good as well. I agree. I don't think you need the romantic thing. I understand it from his point of view because he's falling for her but she can't. Like Nige says, it's technically half a day and she falls in love with him. It doesn't quite work. But the science fiction, like I said before, feels very grounded. You're dealing with exosuits and the blood of aliens enabling you to time travel. And I think the sci-fi is very much grounded as well because you have that opening beach scene battle. It just feels very raw, very like, if this was happening, it isn't so far-fetched. It sounds crazy, but yeah, I can see people being dropped onto a beach and shooting things at aliens. Maybe been taking too many drugs, I don't know, but I've watched this movie. I think it's one of those I've described on the podcast before when I'm flicking channels. If I see a movie I like and I'm like, oh, watch this. I do this all the time with this movie, but I will agree that where's the term come from? Is it skiing? I don't know, but it doesn't stick the landing, as it were.
Nice.
It does everything right up until that kind of, I want to say maybe third act, and then it's just sort of like, oh, you were doing it so well up until this point. But I do think that first 2/3 of the movie is really, really bloody good. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
Nice. Nige, what do you think?
So Etok's touched a lot on a lot of the points. Like just to mention Doug Liman again. Like we did the podcast on Go, and the contrast between that film and this film is staggering in terms of the style. Even the difference between the Bourne Identity film that he did and this, within that sort of, it's a lot more polished. It's probably got closer links to Mr. and Mrs. Smith in terms of the style, perhaps, which I know Mr. and Mrs. Smith isn't a great film, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because the action sequences in that are very strong, etc. So yeah, it's fair enough from that side. I think, like Etok, like the first, hour and a half almost of this film is brilliant. It's really, really enjoyable. I absolutely love the idea of like Tom Cruise being that weak character, building himself up, you being on that journey with him, you seeing everything all the way through. Emily Blunt, fantastic. Supporting cast. We've not really touched upon Bill Paxton's character that much, but it's just classic Bill Paxton. And unfortunately, it was one of his last films before he sadly passed away, far too young. I think there was like a problem after a surgery just real shock in that sense. But Emily Blunt, fantastic. The supporting cast, fantastic. Direction, fantastic. Last 30 minutes just left such an awful taste in my mouth. Like, as soon as it's
not bad.
I think it is, you know.
You think it's bad?
I really just don't like the ending at all. Like,
wow.
And it's weird because you go from like the situation where there's a lot of colour, obviously the fight on the beach, to something where it's really dark and the characters, like, you got the second, almost like whilst the acting's quite good, they're kind of like second-rate expendable characters, and it's just, as I said, because it ends up in such a Hollywoody style ending, it's just a bit like And the worst thing is I can't think of anything that they could have done better to sort of figure it out. They get to a certain point and then I think it's just a really difficult film to end. But because that sort of first 2/3 is so strong and so enjoyable, it's really, really hard to rate this film. Like, I'm in this position where I'm struggling where I'm going to go with it. But I almost wish I'd have stopped watching it before the last half hour, and this would have been really easy.
It's not how this podcast works, Nige.
So I think I'm probably gonna fall on a 6.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So I'm not going like low, and again, but then this was only the second time I'd seen it. So, and it was at the IMAX as well. Like, I wish I'd have had an opportunity to see this at the IMAX, because I didn't, but I can imagine this film at the IMAX, certainly in those battle scenes, is unbelievable.
Would have been amazing.
But yeah, like,
6.
I'm sorry, Rich, as well. I really wanted to give it a higher score because of you, but I've gone with a 6, and God damn it, I'll stand by it.
Fair enough. Yeah, like you, Etok, this is one film that I will happily watch and rewatch again. And if this is on in another 6 months, I just don't really get bored of watching this film. And I think, like I said before, on paper, I think this could have been an absolute disaster. Just like a total random film about aliens and the day repeating. It could have been horrific, but I think it's, I can't disagree with either of what you guys have said, like about the love story or about the ending. That was, one of the things. I don't think it was as bothered about it as you, though, Nige. So
I was very bothered about it.
Yeah, but I think the cinematography is awesome. The editing, the casting is surprisingly good because, Emily Blunt really surprises me in this role, and I just think she's so good in it and so strong in that role, and it's nice and refreshing to see not a helpless woman acting alongside Tom Cruise. It's like such an antidote to like a Bond type female character. And I think it pulls together really well. It's just a fun, exhilarating film, and I just take it for what it is. So yeah, agree, but I'm going to go slightly higher and go for an 8 out of 10 for this one.
Smith with an 8.
Like, for that first 2/3, it is an 8 out of 10 film, like easily, if not maybe higher. But I
understand that. Rich has written in, so Rich recommended this for us to watch, and this is what he's got to say. The film plays out like a Starship Trooper video game, returning you to the saved game each time. The constant repeats are really well paced, and the time loop premise helps really develop the film, from the first drop into the unknown chaos to the winning fight. And then a few bullet points: a top tier Cruise performance alongside badass Emily Blunt, and solid cast, special mention to Bill Paxton and his beautiful speeches, epic loud action and comical scenes that really set the scene, the suits, the weapons, and then the sword and the helicopter blade I think.
Her sword is wicked.
And the alien...
reason, like, just very quickly on the sword, like, the reason they put that in was, like, the manga, it's just like a melee tool. So in computer games, when you run out of bullets or when you're playing on really hard levels, that's when you're using the sword. And obviously, we see as well in the film where the machines, the sort of the mech suits run out of battery. Well, what do you do then? You've got no more bullets. You've got to use the old... sword.
So no chopper.
And then the last...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I was going to say, the last thing, and then the alien CGI still holds up well, even now. And then he's put...
That's a good shout.
It is a good shout, because it's 2014. It's a while ago. Drop or Die, 8.5 out of 10 for Rich.
Oh, Rich, I'm so tempted to give it a 7 now, just on the back of that. It's like an inspirational football coach speech, or like Pacino in Any Given Sunday. He's come in and he's geared me up. I'm like, well, actually, it is a 7.
Are you going to do what you did with Muppet Christmas Carol? And
well, no, I was going to do more of a Inception and just say nothing and just let the people out there be like, I don't know what's happened, and then they can find out at the end of the review show whether I've changed my mind or not.
Well, and guys, what do you think? Edge of Tomorrow. Edge of Tomorrow? Is that what it's called? Yeah. Live, Die, Repeat.
Live, Die,
Doesn't
Repeat.
matter. Whatever they are. What do you guys think? Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast. Follow our YouTube channel, which I'll put a link in the description because I can't remember what it is. And let us know and get in touch. Suggest some more films for us to watch. And we'll see you next time.
That's the 70th time I've heard him say that. It's driving me
To be
mad.
fair, it is. Hello. And welcome back. Etox had a Coke. He's gone early on his Coke.
Started
early and he's blown his nose. To Off Radar. This has been a weird start. I'm James Smith.